Making Regalia is made possible in part by Bernina of Oklahoma City, providers of quality precision sewing machines, and by War Child Society, designers of native apparel, t-shirts, decals, and more, and by generous contributions from viewers like you.
How about that, ladies and gentlemen? We are back here on Making Regalia with me, Juaquin Lonelodge, based here in Concho, Oklahoma. Today we got another special guest for you today, all the way from the Oglala Sioux tribe, Terra Houska. Terra, tell me a little about yourself before we get started rolling.
I grew up in the Rapid City area of the Black Hills in South Dakota. Mm-hmm. I'm actually a half-breed. My mother is Bohemian from Czechoslovakia, and my father is full-blood Oglala Lakota from Wombly, South Dakota.
Oh, right. And I've been to some of the powwows up there. A couple of powwows I've been to is like around Rosebud and around Pine Ridge. You've been there, of course, and stuff. And today, what are we going to do today?
Today, I'm going to show you guys how I kind of developed my own pattern for making tea dresses. Mm-hmm. I dance Northern cloth, and over the years, I just kind of adjusted how I made them to how comfortable they are when I dance.
Mm-hmm. And this cloth dress is very vital to our tribes. This is kind of like the day dress for what women used to dress like back in the day. It first originated from the hides, and when they started trading for cloth and stuff, they came to be cloth dress, but it was something that they wore pretty much almost every day. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and the history of the Stroud cloth is it's called Stroud cloth because it came from Stroud, England, and it's a wool, and it was given to a lot of the tribes as rations. They were wool rations for blankets, clothing, whatever, and then that's when the women made dresses out of them and decorated them.
And I've worked with this style of cloth before. Some people call it, 7-band broadcloth, and it comes in different actual bands. You have the 3-band, 2-band, and you have the more expensive 7-band. This is like the more higher echelon, the best of the best kind of stuff. And the thing is, to all the viewers out there working with this kind of stuff, I would actually work with cotton kind of before you actually start to get with this kind of stuff, because this stuff is a little bit more expensive. And once you make that one cut, it's just you kind of have to work with it from there. It's like either you get it right the first time or you don't get it right at all. So, a little bit of practice, but, once you get, comfortable with working with actual materials, kind of step your game up to doing the 7-band. But, it's just, I have to say, work with cotton before you actually get to this kind of style yet. So now, Terra, what actually got you started into doing dresses? I know this is kind of a labor of love for me. I've sewn a lot. What actually got you into actually sewing?
When I was younger, my mom taught me how to sew, and she started me on just like little pillows, and then I would make Barbie clothes, but I didn't like to hem things, so all my Barbie clothes would fringe, so they could only wear them probably once.
Now, did you ever make, Barbie, actual, tea dresses and stuff, too?
No, I didn't. I actually didn't start sewing powwow regalia until about 2006.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Really? Now, does Barbie have, an actual dress now?
I'm working on it.
Oh, okay. Next thing you know,
matching dresses.
That's what's up, I know my daughter actually tried to make her daughter her Barbie a jingle dress. She cried and cried and made me actually do one. It took forever. I had to sew little designs on there. It had to make it just like hers, and so she was real adamant at me actually doing that. So I've actually done one of those before. Next up, going through it, how do you actually construct it? How do you do your measurements to make your tea dress?
I really eye everything. I don't measure anything. What I do is I take my old dresses and I lay them out on the floor flat, and then I take I buy 3 yards of the trade cloth or broadcloth. In South Dakota, we call it trade cloth. I lay it down flat, lay my dress on top of it, and then that's how I cut out the length.
Now, see, here in the South, we kind of, here in the dirty South, we call it the actual broadcloth. But, it's kind of the same thing, because, I kind of do the same thing as far as getting the the 3 yards, but I kind of measure the person, kind of see where they want it and stuff and like that, and I kind of give it a little bit of gauge. But usually, like my measuring devices, I always use like kind of give it like an inch here for kind of a seam allowance. But how do you eyeball that for to get it that seam allowance?
Well, I use my old dresses, I just kind of like overhang it a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't do a precise measurement, and it's really difficult for me to make dresses for other people because I know how to do my size.
Yeah,
and I know how to make sizes of other people. Some babies. I've done baby dresses also.
That's cool.
Toddler dresses, but for the most part, I eyeball it.
Yeah, that's cool. There's like I think to actually make this kind of tea dress, there's let's see, there's a sleeve, there's 2 sleeves, there's actually a front and a back, and there's also the side piece that actually goes down the side. What's the kind of the history about that side piece that goes down the side?
We call them gussets, side gussets, and where that came from is when the deer hides, when the women would sew 2 deer hides together, the feet would come down at the bottom, and it would make that.
The little lip on the side, right?
Yeah, this little shape right here.
See, and that's kind of evolved into what even today, I see that a lot. Even the southern, like cloth dancers, that little lip is there. Like that's a cool story because like I had never heard about that. I'd always sewn dresses and actually just put that in there, but I never really knew where it came from. That's cool. So it actually came from the actual deer hides themselves.
Yep.
That's cool. But the other thing is that what we're going to show is actually how to attach like the ornaments and stuff. We got some elk's teeth, right?
Yep.
Okay, these came straight from China. We're not actually using the original elk's teeth. Like, a lot of the products out there, these are imitation ones. But, like, at least you can get a lot of them at one time. It's always sought after to get the original, like, elk's teeth. But if you can't, there's always stands that actually have the imitation ones. These look just as good, I mean, I know the sought after authentic ones are a little bit more expensive. These ones are a little bit more, price rangey, you can do these. And I like to use these for little kids too, because, just in case they fall off, you're not spending a lot of money, at least, you can actually come back with those.
A little more information actually about these elk teeth. My degree, I graduated from Haskell Indian Nations University with a degree in environmental science with an emphasis in wildlife biology. So I know wildlife.
All right. I've been to Haskell too, but I never went to school there.
The only person in the dorms that didn't go to school.
I was, I was a regular, I almost seemed like I went to school. Yeah, I've been there.
Well, these teeth are the ivories. So these teeth are the incisors on an elk. There's only 2 on every elk. And what our beliefs are or some of our sayings are, the more elk teeth on a dress shows the wealth of a woman. So all of the teeth on this dress, that's a lot of elk, and it showed how valuable that woman was to the men in her family.
Right, right. She get many horses, huh?
Many, many.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and show, like, actually, you're going to sketch out how you kind of get your measurements or, show it on the paper, right? Okay. So let's get right into that.
So what I do is I lay out my trade cloth flat, and if I draw this, let's say this is my trade cloth.
Now you always got to be, kind of precise. Like I said, this is kind of expensive material. I always, recommend working with cottons, and it's kind of a cheaper material for you to actually do this. And another cool part is like, you can do is you can actually get your template by drawing off on, the cheaper material and then transferring it over to the trade cloth, and that way you can actually get your shape. That way, you could sew it up, and if it fits perfectly, then you can take a seam ripper, rip it all apart, and you actually got your template. So that's another way you could do it too.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So when I get this trade cloth, I have 3 yards of it, and what I do is I measure. This is the bottom down by my feet, and then this is the top up here by my neck, and I measure how wide I want, and I add about 4 inches to each side. So if I want just depends on what your width is. So you got to subtract 4 inches on each side, or 2 inches on each side. And then I just cut it like this to the height.
Very carefully, because that's expensive material. And so what do you use, like, after you do cut like this, what do you use the scraps for sometimes?
The scraps I make baby dresses out of. I've
See?
actually entered the Northern Plains Indian Art Market in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I entered with a baby outfit and dress and won second place at my first art show.
Right on.
And that dress is actually on display at Sage and Silver Americana in Rapid City.
That's cool. So from here, what else we got? We got to cut this.
So I cut this, and I'm going to cut two sides of it, because one for the front and one for the back. And then I'm going to take these two sides, and these are going to be my side gussets.
Okay.
But these are going to drop down, and I can show you that in a little bit. And then I'm going to take this part, and here's my two sleeves.
Right on. Okay.
So it's pretty simple, and sometimes you go more, sometimes this isn't the right length for the sleeve.
Yeah.
You just have to play around with it. I like my sleeves long. I like them to come over my hand. So it just really depends on how you like your sleeves.
Gotcha.
So then when I put it together, I'm going to take this part.
Now, do you shape it to do like kind of almost like a bell, like on your dresses, or do you keep it just a straight, narrow?
I keep it straight and simple.
Okay.
Very simple. And then when I take these side gussets, I drop them down. And when I drop them down to where the lines start. And I line up the top of these lines with the bottom of these ones.
Okay. All right.
So it comes up to right about here.
I think that's about 4 inches from there and going down, right? I do believe. I'd say that's about 4.
I would say 2.5.
Something like that. Well, we're eyeballing it, so we're not using measurement devices.
So then I have my side gussets. And then my sleeves, I fold them in half. And on the tea dresses, this bottom part right here is open.
Yeah, that is true. Now, do you run like bias tape on the insides on there, or do you just fold it over and sew it?
When I'm doing my dresses like I'm supposed to, I fold them over. When I'm in a hurry, I don't.
Of course.
Most of my older dresses, I didn't hem any of them or put any bias tape on them, just because wool doesn't
tear as much.
Yeah.
I do that a lot. Sometimes if I make an outfit for myself, it happens to me all the time that, I'll make it for myself. And since it's for myself, I'm always like, well, I'll come back and I'll finish it up, or I'll do this. And I never do. It's like, and then people were like, well, hey, can I buy your old stuff? And I'm like, yeah, all right. But it's kind of like a problem I have just when I make my own stuff out there. So the other part is like the neck lining. About like, what do you gauge your neck when you cut that neck?
What I do is I fold these corners in half. I fold them in half, and then I eyeball it.
Do you fold it in half and cut it and then try to stick your head through it like that? Because I've done that. That was usually how I get my neck perfect. So.
No,
Or, you can actually fold it in half, cut the neckline, and cut a slit down there. But, since these are different dresses, that's what I've done in the past. But for these ones, it's just going to be a straight neck. So
what I do is when I sew these together, I do the side gusset to the front part, to the side gusset to the back part, and then bring it around.
Okay.
And so the bottom part is sewn together and the top part's not. And then I pull the two top parts together and I fold them in half, and then I cut the slit, or make it a little bit more round, because some of my dresses, it's not as round, and it comes up and it chokes me when I dance. And it's hard to wear a choker when you're dancing with it, so.
Yeah. Or you could, cut the back a little bit high and cut the front a little bit low. That way it kind of gives you a little room in the front.
And I've also seen some people do a slit in the back.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about.
So it's tight. Okay.
Yeah. So after cutting out all our designs, we think we spent probably about $800, but we finally got a actually matching set. No, I'm kidding. It only took us like one time, well actually her, to actually cut and construct all our pieces. About how much do you think, like your 7-brand broadcloth goes for? Like,
usually around $90 a yard.
Yeah.
And if you buy 2 or I think it's 3 or more yards, you can get a discount. And I actually buy my 7-band from Sharp's Indian Store in Ponca City.
Yeah, I've dealt with them. And there's other places you can get it. I think there's one in Oregon. There's also one in California. Actually, I bought it from before too. And there's also different prices too as far as the bands, right?
Yes, the 3-band in South Dakota I usually purchase at Prairie Edge, and that's about $32 a yard. And then this blue that I have over here, this is an old style blue. It doesn't have any bands on it. It's an older style, an older color, and that is about $60 a yard.
Yeah, so like I said, ladies and gentlemen out there, when you start working with actual broadcloth or trade cloth, it is kind of easier to work with like cottons first before you actually get your skills up. So what we're going to do now is she's going to show how you attach, the gusset to the front part of the dress, front or back part of the dress. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our Bernina sewing machine from Bernina, Oklahoma City, and she's going to go ahead and sew that together.
So first of all, I like to line up my gusset with my dress, and I line up the bottom of this
with the band
top.
To the band?
Yep.
All right, and we're just going to go straight down the middle?
Yep.
Well, straight down the side of it, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I usually leave probably, I want to say a half an inch or a little less. Okay, so I'm just going to sew along straight, and since I eyeball all of my cuts, it's not perfectly straight.
Yeah.
But nobody can tell.
Right. So what she's going to be doing is going like on the side of the material, piecing both of them together and infusing them together. Terra, about, like you say you decorate your dresses and stuff. Where do you get your designs from?
Most of my designs I get from old photographs.
I've done that.
A lot of them from the 1800s. We do have ancestors from Oklahoma, so we have a lot of Cheyenne blood in our Lakota family, as well as Lakota. So I try to find Lakota or Cheyenne type dresses.
Gotcha.
And I like elk teeth. I like dentilium. I use a lot of bugle beads and.
What about like on some of the dresses I see that you actually do kind of a buckskin like little strap. Do you do those too? Do you like with a little like the gold little cones?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I put those on usually around where my knees would be, and they just kind of give it a little more movement when you're dancing. So when you're dancing to the beat of the drum, those are moving with it, and it also gives it a little bit of a jingle.
And I think that kind of evolved from the buckskin dresses from way back then. People started kind of took that strap from the buckskin dress and actually started putting it on the cloth dresses too. So going forth, we're going to continue sewing this together. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've actually infused 2 pieces together, just one straight stitched all the way up the side of it. We've kind of got a little seam allowance on there, and if you flip it over, you're going to see like both pieces are actually like just straight sewn together on this side. And so what I like to do is make it kind of clean cut and kind of give it a clean look. Is what I'll do is I like to fold this over right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-sew right up down this line. It kind of makes the material more flush, and when you actually wear it, it's not actually going to rub on you. So that's kind of what I like to do with the broadcloth. And once I'm finished with that, you're going to see on the finished product on this side, you'll see 3 lines. You'll see 1 line on this side, 1 line on this side, plus the actual, when it's fused together. It kind of gives it a little more, I guess, how would you say it? A little bit more perfected, like kind of look to it. That's kind of something I do on the side just to make it look a little bit better. So what she's going to do is she's going to fold over the side and just sew straight up the middle, or straight up the side again, and just holding this little flap down. So we're going to go ahead and load this up and ready to go. Once again, using our Mercedes and sewing machines. So Terra, what kind of sewing machine you got back home?
I just have a brother.
Oh, yeah.
I have a really basic brother. It's older. It's probably about 10 years old.
Yeah, like I said on the show, I've got an old Janami, and like I'm not sure how many miles you got on yours, but mine is up there.
Yeah, mine is mostly trade cloth dresses. I do have to get it tuned up probably once every 6 months because the wool really gets caught under.
Oh yeah, yeah. Usually I take mine apart and, you know, I'll go through it, you know, I'll clean it out. But always remember, you have to oil these machines too. So if you start to take your machine apart, you can always get the all-in-one oil. And what I'll do is I'll run a Q-tip and go around some of like the joints in there. So that way, you know, once you do clean it out, it kind of takes the lubrication out. So henceforth, that's kind of a tip of the day, I would say.
Yeah, and if I can't get the tension right, I take it into the shop. Usually it's messed up a little bit.
Yeah, I spent many early nights trying to get it tension just perfect, and then finally just gave up and took it to the shop. So I know your pain. So here we're going to go through and just solder that flap over, and then from here, we're going to come back to you and show the other side. Cool beans. So now what we're going to do is Tara's going to attach our Chinese elk teeth. What we're going to do, she likes to do this before she actually sews like her whole dress up first. Kind of for, you know, kind of get more work out of it before you tack everything together, right?
Yeah, and I like to sew everything on before it's put together because then everything lays flat and then I can use a yardstick to draw my lines and measure out my teeth where this is completely flat and there's no folds in it.
Yeah, and usually when you measure out, I like to use like chalk and stuff like that to kind of gauge where it's actually where I need it to be perfectly placed, right?
Yep, I actually use, I think I got from just Walmart, a yellow cloth pencil.
Okay.
Like a colored pencil.
Yeah. And these are our Chinese elk teeth, the authentic ones, right?
Yep, these are traditional Chinese elk teeth.
Right.
Ivories, plastic ivories.
So when placing these on, how do you attach them though?
So, you know, I just need a needle and a thread.
Do you use sinew or just regular thread?
I just use regular thread, like beading thread.
Okay.
I have a thinner kind I use for some beads, and then for some like bigger beads, I'll use a thicker kind. Mm-hmm. And I'll usually use the thicker kind. Mm. And I always start from underneath the cloth, and you can barely see my little yellow mark there.
Okay.
But then I'll come up through this hole in the elk tooth. And then when it's laying down flat, I put it on the side of it.
Uh-huh.
And I come back up through it again to tack down the other side, but on the last side, I add a little bling.
All right. That's a little something extra you kind of throw in there, right?
Yeah, and you know, there's different ways to attach a sequin. Sometimes with these elk teeth, I was just tacking them down, but I've seen some people use small seed beads. Mm-hmm. If you use the small seed bead, you can go straight back down through the sequin, and it'll tack it down that way.
That's cool. Now, you know, like a lot of the different things that we, you know, use, like these elk teeth, they already have pre-drilled holes, right?
Yep.
That's cool. Because, you know, back in the olden days, they would actually have to cut a little hole in there, and, you know, that was the actual teeth. But, you know, these ones are pre-made, and actually they save a lot of time because, you know, it's just right out of the package, all you got to do is tack them down.
Yeah, and one thing I do with these, and you can see if you look close to any of them, I take my scissors. There's, at the top of these, there's a little mark from where the molds are. Uh-huh. And I take my scissors, not my good scissors, but some duller scissors, and I just kind of like shave it down a little bit so it looks a little bit more natural.
Right, a little bit more authentic.
Yeah.
So from there, you're going to go like through the material, go through the eyelet, and then attach your little sequin, and then you go around the sides, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And how long do you think it takes you to do like all the elk teeth?
I would say about a whole season of Orange is the New Black.
Oh, right. You like that sitcom? I would have said, you know, something like Sons of Anarchy or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's my favorite.
Well, my new Netflix one is Gossip Girl, so.
Yeah. I got you.
But, you know, it takes a lot of time, and I just sit in front of the TV. It's nice because you can sit on the couch and do it. And I use this little bowl And I just keep my sequins and my elk teeth in here. Oh.
Okay. So from the other designs that you were talking about, you use like, Cheyenne designs and also Sioux designs. You like get a little bit geometric designs, right?
Yep.
On your dresses?
Yep. Looking at some of the older photographs of women, of their dresses, they have old brass sequins at the bottom of their dresses. And they shape them into teepees. And I've seen crosses and morning stars, those type of things also at the bottom of the dresses. And I'll usually use sequins for those, and only sequins. And to tack those sequins down, that's when I come up with the seed bead. And then I tack it down with the seed bead, go back through the hole of the sequin.
Cool.
And I just use the colored pencil, the cloth colored pencil, to draw the design, just little dots. And I've had really good luck with it just rubbing off so you can't see it at all.
So to recap, and to save a little bit of time, we're going to go through and show you how this dress was constructed. First, you have the front and the back, and plus you have the gusset, which hold these two pieces together. You see it's like it's got a seam here, and it goes all the way up here to the very top. From there, you're going to come up to the neckline. Of course, it's going to be sewn here, right at the very top, and that's going to be your center. From there, you're going to take your sleeves, fold them together, and once you get that center line, from there, you'll have your center line for your sleeve. A lot of people will take that center line to this center line because of the seam, and you sew this side, and then you got your perfect dress. From there, it's really easy. You just cut out the neck, roll the neck over, sew it in there, and your dress is complete, and you're ready for grand entry. And
you can also use bias tape for the neckline if you don't want to fold it over.
Yeah, but sometimes you get a dirty neck and you get the bias tape dirty. No, just kidding. So another thing that we got, like Terra is also an accomplished earring maker, right?
Yes, I do a lot of custom beadwork and different beadwork. You can see some of my earrings.
All right. So you kind of do like the flat stitch too, right?
Yeah, I use like an applique stitch, so I'll use 2 needles usually in most of my stuff.
I've seen that before. Like one tacks it down while the other one, like you actually load the beads on, right?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe here in a little bit we'll get to another show, like you actually showing us how to do the earrings too.
Yeah, that would be great.
That'd be awesome. Well, Terra, once again, thanks for coming on Making Regalia. To all the people out there in Powell land, I want to thank Powells.com for rebroadcasting us FNX First Nation experience out of San Bernardino. And to all our affiliates out there, thanks for tuning in with me, Juaquin Lonelodge, Making Regalia. Hope.
Bye-bye.